Welcome back to another episode of the American Gamedog podcast, where tradition meets tenacity, and we give voice to the real dogmen who have shaped the history of the American Pit Bull Terrier. I'm your host, CY, and today's episode is one that you don't want to miss. Before we begin, let me make this absolutely clear. All accounts discussed on this podcast are for historic and educational purposes only. We do not condone, promote, or support dogfighting in any way, shape, or form. This platform exists to preserve the cultural, working, and historical legacy of the American Pit Bull Terrier within the boundaries of the law and ethical dog ownership. Now, with that said, today's guest is Madison Parker, a former Navy SEAL and lifelong dogman whose story spans from battlefield grit to bulldog legend. He's someone who brings discipline, honor, and perspective from both worlds, and today we're talking about where those paths intersect. From high stakes missions overseas to hand conditioned bulldogs at home, Madison lives by a code that most people can't even begin to understand. Whether you're new to this world or you're born into it, this episode will make you think, reflect, and hopefully learn. So leash up, lock in, and let's get into it. This is Madison Parker on the American Game Dog podcast. How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing good. How are you doing, CY?
I'm doing pretty good, man. Thankful to have you on the podcast today. Looking forward to hearing your perspective and what it was like back in those times, when it was real bulldogging, real bulldogs.
Yeah.
Yes,
Well,
sir.
I think it's still real bulldogs. It's just there's been so much lost uh, from the old days when the game was smaller, but the competition was greater. But the big money, you heard about it, but it wasn't as common. Nowadays, I don't know what they're doing. I don't really want to be a part of what they're doing. It's kind of sad what's happened to the dog game. It makes me a little bit melancholy every time I think about what happened to it or what's happened to it.
Yes, sir.
And the dogs themselves, if you listen to them and you watch them and you learn from them, you can learn how to live a life of honor just by how they act toward you. And they're honorable dogs. They have a tremendous amount of honor in the way they are.
Yes, sir.
They're patient. They wait on you. They focus on you. Everything they do. Sometimes I think God gave us dogs so we could learn from the dogs how God wants us to be towards Him.
Yes, sir.
Because the way that dog is toward its owner is the way God calls us to be toward Him. The dogs love you without any conditions. The dogs will do whatever you want them to do if you just learn how to deal with them. They'll wait for you. They're patient. They're just
Sir.
so many attributes about them that remind me that I think we got them. We have dogs because God gave them to us, and we learn from them how to be with it. We learn from the dog, not in every way, but a lot of things you learn from a dog. It doesn't have to be pit bulls, just dogs in general.
Yes, sir.
We learn from dogs how God wants us to be toward Him. And but I find it rather sad. It kind of heartbreaking, that we've lost. Um, we've lost so much when the dog game changed, and I don't know. It's kind of I. Although nowadays, as a Christian, I don't think God's calling us to do those things anymore. That's things I was doing before I wasn't a Christian. I become a Christian later.
Yes, sir.
But there's still some wonderful times and good times to be had, and some great memories. And that's really what we're doing, kind of reliving some of the old days. And I hope even people that are still doing the dogs, still fighting dogs. I just wish they'd be a little bit more civil. I think some of them are, nowadays you get into an argument, they're gangsters. They use drugs to support their dogs. And then if I heard a story recently where some guys were, I just heard the story. I don't know if it's true or not. I just heard it. Of course, I wasn't there. I don't know, but I heard that there was a match between two guys or a group of guys. I think the one guy was kind of more or less by himself. He won the match, and the guys that lost, they were the gangsters, drug dealers, and that. They lost the match. They paid the guy off. He got his truck, started leaving. Well, they went around the other way and caught him as he was leaving,
Man,
down the road. They ended up shooting him, killing him, and taking the money that they had lost.
it's sad,
And then
man.
they took his dog too.
Man, yeah, that's
Did you hear
sad.
that? Have
No,
you heard that story?
I hadn't heard that story, but I have heard about you know how they getting real strict for as like think it was like Georgia or something or the other where a guy got over 400 years and
Yeah.
he didn't
Hmm.
even get caught dog fighting, you know,
Yeah.
but they gave him over 400 years. So it's really a serious thing now. People are, risking their life to, you know, do something that's really not even worth it anymore, you know.
No, it didn't. It's not worth it. It takes all the fun out of it. I decided a long, long time ago, back in the about turn of century around 99, 2000. I changed a lot. That's where I really gave my life over. I mean, I was a Christian before that, but I was kind of backslid. But
Yes.
I had made up my mind I was done. I wasn't going to do no more. It's been about 30 years ago, but I decided when it quit being fun, when I found that I wasn't having fun anymore, that I just wasn't going to do it. And then I had an experience, and I ended up winning the match, but I realized on the way home that it wasn't no fun. I didn't have no fun, even though I won. I realized right there, I thought to myself, well, I think this is, more or less felt like maybe it was God speaking to me. The Holy Spirit was speaking to me that, you know, why are you doing this? If it's not fun, why you do it? And I had made up my mind some 30 years before, 25 years before that, that it was a lot of fun, and I knew as long as it was fun, I was going to keep doing it. Here I was going home after a win. I mean, I should have been happy as I could be, but I didn't have much fun doing it. So that was when I decided that was it. But I never got rid of my dogs. I always kept my dog. I just quit fighting
Yeah.
dogs. That's been quite a long time ago,
Yes, sir.
but anyway. So
All right. Well, we're gonna go ahead and get to some questions.
Yeah.
And the first one that I want to ask you is what drew you to the dogman lifestyle?
Well, I was Navy SEAL, and my brother was 101st Airborne. He was a lot younger than me, but I had been with the SEALs in Vietnam. And of course, before I went in the Navy, I always wanted a pit bull, but I didn't have one. Didn't know where to get one, but being a Navy SEAL, I didn't have time. But I came home on leave about 2 years before I was supposed to get out of the Navy for permanently. I was going to retire out of the Navy SEALs, and I came home on leave. My brother had gotten a dog. And we went over to Pete Sparks and picked the dog up, and we learned a lot just driving home. We had bought some books from Pete Sparks, and anyway, I had this experience with the Navy, and it was a combat thing. I had been in combat with the SEALs, and getting out, the war was over. Thing that most people don't understand about. Well, some people do, but something happens to you, especially a young guy in combat situation. There's there's an adrenaline pump that happens to you, and it's when at the moment it's not fun, but
Yes,
when
sir.
you're done and you get back and you're home, it's almost like you realize you got to do that again. You got to have that experience. It has to happen again. And so when the war became, Vietnam War was over, we came home. I knew shit. There wasn't nothing to be a Navy SEAL and not have a war is like being a doctor and not having anybody sick patients. So it's kind of like, you train and you train and you train, but for what? If there's no war, what are you training for?
Yeah.
Anyway, I had had the experience, but I knew that I could kind of relive that experience through the dogs in a combat situation because that's exactly what it is. It's dog against dog combat, and it's one person getting his dog ready and the other person getting his dog ready, and you can see between a man and his dog and another man and his dog. So it's two men and two dogs, and you find out who's got the best dog, and you find out who who has the best program for getting the dog ready. So a great deal of it is the dog, but also another great deal of it is how prepared you are and how much you go through. But I had all this background with the SEALs, and my brother too, 101st Airborne.
Good.
Uh, we both just were drawn to it. We wanted to go into the combat thing with the dogs, and it was like 70. I think it was about 78 or 79 when we matched our first dog. We had had dogs for about 5 years before that, but I was still active duty in the SEALs, and I had to come home. Once I came home and got out, then we got started. But that was really what it was all about for us, kind of getting back into that. And trust me, I talked about it. I think we talked about it before about to be a real dog man. I mean, there's dog men that have never done anything with a dog as far as matching them.
Yeah.
And you get a lot of pleasure and a lot of excitement out of owning them, just having them. But if until you step over the wall with a dog in your arms and you got money bet on it, and it not no small amount. I'm talking about, 3 or 4 thousand in my day. 34
Yeah.
thousand. That was a lot of money.
Yes,
And
sir.
then your dog's life is dependent. That dog is dependent on you as much as you are on him. So it's a it's a it's an
Teamwork.
it's huh yeah, it's
Teamwork.
teamwork. That's right. It's teamwork, and that dog's dependent on you to get him ready and right and conditioned properly, and you're dependent on him to be a good dog to care to make it happen, to do it. So it's a, a team effort, a group effort between you and the dog. And I don't know, we just had stepping over that wall. When you do that, man, something happens to you. You'll get a rush. It's almost like it's a rush, almost like I've seen it go over a person, young guys mostly, not necessarily old time dog man, but I've seen some young guys coming in that had never matched a dog. It didn't happen to me as bad, but it did happen. But I recall that it was very much like getting shot at in a combat situation. Man, when that happens and they're trying to kill you,
Yeah.
if you don't faint, you better not faint, because if you faint, you're going to die. So
Man.
it didn't happen to me, but that adrenaline rush is there. But
Yeah.
until you do it, until you take a dog, bet all your hard-earned money on it, and condition it, and go into a combat situation with that dog, um, until you do that, you really don't understand that pit bull. You don't really get everything he is until you see it, till you were there going all the way, full out, live or die in
Yeah.
every way. And trust me, when I'm relating this experience and this story, I'm not promoting the fighting of dogs. I'm just telling the story of what happens to a dog man, or to me, what did happen to me, what has happened to me, and what does happen to anybody that matches dogs.
Yes, sir.
It's it's a very, very intense experience, stepping over that wall with a dog in your arms, and your opponent is already in his corner with his dog waiting on you. And when you step over the wall and you put him on his all fours facing the other dog, that referee says, you know, scratch your dogs, and it's on, buddy. It's an adrenaline rush like you've never had. And until
Man.
you do it, and then of course the long slugging experience of sometimes they go a long, long time. Anything over 90 minutes can go either way. I've always said if it goes past 90 minutes, um, that match can go to your opponent so easy. One little wrong move, or one little mistake or mishandle, or the dog can fall out. Things happen. But I've been over the 3 hour mark. With mine, I've been over 3 hours two times. My brother's been over the 4 hour mark one time, and I've been to the 2 hour mark probably half a dozen times.
Man.
Last uh, hour 57 was my last really long hard one, 157, which is the 2 hours. It's a gut wrencher. Every minute that ticked by, it's a gut wrencher, buddy. Again, as I relate this story of my experience, I don't want people to think that it's okay to do it. It's not worth it. It gets you in trouble.
Yes,
And I'm
sir.
thinking now that morally, it's probably not a good idea to do it in a moral sense, because you are you are risking the life of the dog, and you're risking your own life nowadays.
Oh yeah.
uh, back in the 80s, you were risking the dog's life, but you really weren't risking your own. Not really. Nowadays, you might be risking your own life because people that you match into might shoot you. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know what they're crazy. And a lot of them don't even know nothing about a good dog. They don't know what a good dog is. They don't know how to breed a good dog. They don't even what a, they don't really know what makes up a good dog. But the answer to your question was, I hope I didn't get off of it too far, but it was what drew me to the game, and that was it.
Okay.
Having been in Vietnam and being trained as a Navy SEAL and the combat situation, I guess I was still trying to live it in my own way, but I was mostly developing a relationship with a dog. There's nothing quite like developing a relationship with a dog when you're going to go all the way with him. And the closest thing you can get to it without doing that, it'd be taking them hog hunting or hunting some kind of really powerful and crazy, like powerful animal, you
Yeah.
know, like, so I don't know, like a pack of coyotes or something,
Oh
where,
yeah.
uh, I found I was hunting with mine, that's where I went with mine. That's what I did. I kept my dogs when I got out of the fighting part of it. I kept my dogs and I started hunting small game. I one got away from me. He had a GPS collar on him, and it somehow got snagged or ripped off him. I can't remember exactly what happened, but anyway, the GPS collar got off of him, and I couldn't find him. And I walked and walked. I guess I walked for 12, 15 hours looking for him. I started in a small circle and kept making the circle wider and wider. Hell, it took me almost better than a day, or really about a day, to find him. When I found him, he was laid out. He was so tired he couldn't even walk.
Man.
I found him. He wouldn't. He was scratched up, bit up a little bit, but he had gotten into a hole, and he dug his way down into that hole. It turns out it was a coyote den, and there
Ooh.
was a whole pack of coyotes living in that hole. It was real cold that night, and we'd been hunting,
Jesus.
and he got into a pack of coyotes.
Man.
He killed, I think, at least. I found 3 dead ones, and another one. I'm pretty sure he was messed up because he had gotten him off of where he killed 3, and I know he was way off from there, but I never did find the 4th one. But I'm pretty sure he had tied into the 4th one, and it got away from him because by the time he got that last one, he is so tired he couldn't finish him. About
Man.
killed him, but that
Got to
was
love it,
quite a night.
man.
That was something. But so that's things you can do with your dog. They're not illegal. That's not illegal. You can do that
Yes,
because
sir.
coyotes are a nuisance animal, and they're also a invasive species. Where hell, when I was a young kid, they didn't even have coyotes where I live. North Florida, there weren't coyotes here, but they've come into this area now and are all
Yeah.
over. And the
Man.
same with armadillos and also the hogs. The hogs are invasive. They Problem with hogs is they eat the oak tree. They kill the oak trees. If
Man.
oak trees get killed, then there's no acorns. There's no acorns. That kills that stops the population for turkeys and wild birds and raccoons and deer
Man.
and just a whole wide range of animals that live off acorn. And the hogs destroy the oak trees because they root up the roots. And when they root up the roots, they expose those roots on the tree and it kills the tree. So hogs are bad. They're terrible. So it's a good thing you got dogs, the pit bulls, to go catch the hogs. That's a good thing.
Yeah, go ahead
That
and get them
helps the
out of there.
environment,
Yeah, it does.
So, but yeah, in answer to the question, I hope that didn't go too long with that. Just
No, no, you all right.
that's what
Yeah.
took me to it, being my brother and I both looking for some excitement, do something exciting and not just exciting, but challenging. I mean, it's a tremendous challenge. The competition was crazy good. There was a lot of people in it, and they became more and more as the sport gained popularity. And of course, it was been here in this country since the turn of the century.
Oh,
In fact, they were fighting dogs back in the late 1800s here, but it really got popular probably after World War II.
what?
As far as numbers, a lot of people getting in it. And I talked to old Floyd Boudreaux. He told me, I asked him, I said, what was the most competitive time you know of? He said, right now. I said, how so? He goes, well, there's more people in it now than there ever have been. And it's above board and the competition is strong because there's bigger numbers. I think I related before to somebody was it's kind of like, say you got a Dallas, Texas. They got the number one high school in Dallas, Texas, and they're going to play another team in Texas, but that team is out middle of nowhere, like I don't know, some little old podunk town like Mesquite, Texas, or something tiny. So this school from Dallas they've got way, way, way more talent pool to choose from. They've got 10 or 15 young men that want to play fullback, and they got 15 or 20 men that want to play halfback, and so they got just
More to
more
choose
to
from.
choose from. Yeah, more good players to choose from, and on the same token, at Mesquite, they just don't have as many to choose from. But so what happened to the game? Of course, this is Floyd Boudreaux telling me this. That's what has happened. There's just so much competition and new people getting in it bring new ideas, new understanding, and these not stupid people. I'm talking about very smart, well thought out, people that know understand science. The science,
Yeah.
because matching dogs, you have to have. In other words, if you're going to bet money on something, you put money behind whatever you're doing. If you put a regular basketball team out there and neither side is playing for anything other than just they play because they love to play. But then you go up the road and you put another team on there and both teams are playing for money.
Yeah.
Buddy, the teams that are playing for money are always going to be better than the teams that aren't playing for money. So because you have money involved in it, money is part of it. You bring that brings the top competitors. It doesn't matter who it is. If there's money on it, they're going to do everything they can to figure out how to win. So that brings the competition up to a higher level. Uh, so that's the way it was. But and the other problem with that too was I think nowadays it's worse than it was in my day. Was a lot of these dog men were dealing drugs. They were buying and selling drugs in order to make money to feed their dogs rather than just working a regular job
Man.
and taking care of their dogs with the money they earn from working. And that
Yeah.
was more or less the way it was when I got in it. Most people worked for a living and paid their dog food bill and all their other medical bills with the money they earn from working a 9 to 5. Whereas nowadays, a lot of these gangsters, they just deal drugs and they don't work and they just stay,
Yeah.
So it's a different mentality now than it was then.
Yes,
Now, I'm not
sir.
saying drugs weren't in it back in the day, but in the late 70s when I got in it, hell, I didn't even know what any drugs were. Marijuana was about it. There weren't really any other drugs that I was privy to.
So,
We would take that trucker speed. We'd take that trucker speed to stay awake on the weekend when there was a big dog show, dog convention. But other than those two drugs, smoking marijuana and taking trucker speed was about it. Drinking coffee all weekend. That was about
yeah.
it. But nowadays, God, I don't know. They all half of them
Yeah.
buying and selling drugs to support their dog business,
Yeah, man. They got all
which has
kinds of stuff.
absolutely destroyed what could have been, a pretty awesome, in my opinion, could be. I always dream about the idea of course, it's just a dream, but the idea that it could be sanctioned. In other words, it would be sanctioned by a certain body of dogmen and agreed upon by the state or the federal government if it was regulated. Say you had set up a lot like, say, the UFC,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you bring the men in, and of course,
It'd take a lot of the
he,
riffraff out of it too.
yeah, it would get the riffraff out, but it would bring the top competition. But you know, you would have to change it a little bit and make it be like you'd have a you'd have a vet, you'd have a licensed veterinarian at the pit side for to check to find out. It's
Yeah.
like when you put them in the corner. When you scratch the dogs, bring them into the corner, and each dog had it's like, say, it's 30-second in the corner, and then it's a 10-second scratch count. Or same thing like that, but a referee goes around. He's right there when you make the start scratching
Yeah.
to decide, hey, we got to call this when this dog's dying. This
Yeah.
dog is dying. We're calling it. We're going to give it to the other guy, but at least we're not going to kill the dog.
Yeah.
And but have the referee call it that way, not the referee, but the vet.
Yeah.
But if neither dog was in danger of dying, you could let it continue until one either won or lost, or the other one of them quit, or you know, one
Yeah.
guy, wanted to throw in the towel, and do it a lot like they do with the UFC.
Yeah.
To me, if you could do that, it could be a clean sport if you had it oversee. You got oversight, say, by at least one veterinarian, and then you had a body of judges, like points, like in a boxing match where they award points on points, or in the UFC, because they got to decide, the judges decide who wins and who loses if it's close. Neither fighter gets knocked out, so to speak, and they were both in it the whole way.
Yeah.
And
Split
one
decision.
round it was this guy, and the other round was the other guy, so it's a split decision. The judge got a split decision. You always had a odd number of judges, like, say, you got 5 judges or 3 judges. So I don't know. I've dreamed up the idea that if you could do it that way, man, what a wonderful thing it could be.
Yeah.
But the most important part of it would be making sure, and then aftercare, making sure that the dogs are going to be cared for, and they're number one first before you go in. The dog is good, in good shape. He's okay. He's a
Yep.
dog worthy. In other words, you're not bringing no dog in there that's too old or no. Everybody knows you shouldn't be using that dog because it's just a fight. You can't, if you let humans fight, why couldn't you let dogs fight? I don't know.
It's
To me, humans are more important than dogs,
yeah,
although dogs are very important to me. It's the fact I feel more about my dogs than I do about a lot of humans. But I know that humans are more important.
yeah,
In the kingdom of God, humanity is more important than dogs are.
yes,
But
sir.
nevertheless, I mean, that whole idea, it's just a fantasy, really.
Yeah,
I've thought about how you could do it, how you could make it like the UFC if you had a panel of judges and you had a veterinary oversight and you had everybody, the judges would be dog men. You couldn't just have judges being some regular old people. You'd have to have judges that were experienced dog men that understood what they were watching, you know, and they were right there at pitside with a clipboard, and they were marking off points in case the match came down to a judgment. And a lot of times the judges wouldn't even be in it because the match was clearly won by one dog over the other because on the fifth scratch or the 10th scratch or the 15th scratch, this old dog, he did good, but he just stood in the corner. He couldn't come out.
yes, sir.
So he stood, and, the judges ain't even in it when it's like that. So, those are fantasies. That's never going to happen.
Yeah, man. But, so moving on to the next question.
Yeah.
Who were some of your biggest influences in the pit bull community back in the day?
Oh, wow. Well, I guess the biggest influence in the early days was probably Bert Charles, Maurice Carver. I met Maurice at Pitside. Uh, I didn't really know Bert that well. I mean, I knew him good, but I didn't know Bert as well as I had become to know Bert later on better. But me and my brother went to a show over in West Louisiana, right there on the border of Texas. And it's a big dog show, and it's a whole bunch of people there. And Maurice was there, and yeah, he was such a nice guy. He was crooked, and he was always up to something, advantage, getting advantage. He he knew how to, make that money. He was about, and he didn't care if you let him get away with it, he'd sell you a cur. But if you called him on it, he'd let you bring the cur back, and he'd sell you a good one after that. But you had to push him on it. You know what I mean? So he was a big influence, Maurice Carver. But I
Yeah,
guess overall, as far as knowledge about everything, Bert Samuels moved from Marana, Arizona to my place, and we had I helped him out. He had gotten in some trouble, and I helped him get out of the trouble by getting the dog out of the dog kennel. It was a San Diego County animal shelter. I got that Johnny Walker Red dog. I had told the story before, so most people listening to this probably already heard the story. I won't go through it again because it's
yes, sir.
redundant. I think most people know the story, but that's how I got connected to Bert Charles and became his friend. And so probably about 10 years after me and my brother were steadily matching and winning with the dogs, Bert decided he wanted to move from Arizona to over, in the east. And he didn't, when I first talked to Bert about it, he didn't really tell me where. I said, "Where are you going to move to, Bert?" And he goes, "Well, I was looking at Mississippi, and I was looking at Alabama and Georgia, or even Florida, there where you are? I said, yeah. I said, and then we talked a little bit here and there, and I told him, well, I said I had a place that he could come to and get settled, and uh, maybe from there he could figure out, a place of his own. But he could come to my place, and I opened the door for him. But I didn't really, say he had to. I was just, whatever his decision was. But I would help him get settled,
Yes, sir.
once he made the move. And I know that move cost him a lot of money. So Bert Sarles and Maurice Carver had a big influence, and then I think some of the greats that I really had uh, had influenced me a lot. And Norman Kimmer was a big influence. I always respected Norman because he always showed up clean cut. He was never dirty. He was always clean. His hair was always combed nicely. He always had a nice shirt on. Sometimes he'd even have a coat and a tie, like a businessman. And so he had a big influence just by the way he was, but he taught me a lot, learned a lot from Norman, and got to be friends with Norman. And the thing that's cool about Norman is, even though I was a newcomer, he treated me like because a lot of those guys that were old timers, they disdain you toward you. It's like, get out of my way, you're green, you don't know nothing, get away from me. You don't, or
Yeah.
they wouldn't say that, but they kind of act that way if you come around.
Yeah.
And so mostly I just kept to myself when it got like that, me and my brother. But there was always people there too. Let's see, Ray Carver, Bert Sarles, Norman Kimmer. Oh gosh, uh, Larry Jarrett, Irish Jerry Holcomb. Um, Irish Jerry at that time. I think, Irish Jerry just died. I think Irish Jerry had a big influence on me. When I met Irish Jerry, um, it was a couple months after I met him that we were matched into him. But he had a big influence on me, mostly because of his reputation and what all he had accomplished. By the time I got in it, Irish Jerry was voted by the Sporting Dog Journal as being I think they voted him the number one dog man of the 1980s. And
Man.
buddy, that was a busy time. That was when people like Jerry Holcomb and them there, I think they were matching 2, 3 dogs a month, which is almost a dog a week. If you
Yeah.
figure you're doing one dog a week, buddy, you're a busy man.
Oh yeah, that's a lot.
But that means you got 2 or 3 dogs going all the time and you're working them. And there's a lot to do on just if you're just doing one dog. But so Jerry Holcomb was a big influence, Larry Jarrett. Then I met a lot that influenced me, but in a negative way, that I didn't like. I think one of the worst I ever met was old Harry Hargroves. He was a hater. We whipped him. We matched into him. Well, it wasn't him. He'd sold the dog. He had one with his dog named Cottonmouth Joe, and then he sold him to a guy that lived down there near where we lived. And he opened him up. And we matched into him. I had Joe Testament dog matched into him to this Cottonmouth Joe dog from uh, Harry Hargroves, and The guy matched into us, but Harry came as more or less taking step by step through it because he had bought the dog, he had sold the dog to this guy we were matched into, and we won. We won the match. It wasn't even a hard match. We won pretty easy. Harry Hargroves from that time on hated me and my brother just because we won. I mean, he hated us. So he was an influence, but not in a good way, but negative way. People like
Yeah.
that they can't see past, they lose a match, then they hate the people that whipped, they lost to. There's no point in that. I mean, it's between the dogs anyway. But of course, the guy behind the dog has a lot to do with whether you win or not. But still, I never understood why people like Harry Hargroves would hate you just because we won a match over him. I think part of it was because he'd been in it for so long already, and here was these newcomers coming there and whipped his ass. People, that was hard for people, man. That was real hard because me and my brother hit the ground running, and we didn't. We, you know, there was a lot of stuff that we had understood about the things that you need to win a match before we ever matched a dog. I grew up in the household. My dad was a doctor, and I understood how important it was for the things you do to a dog as far as conditioning. Of course, we understood conditioning. I was a Navy SEAL. I think Navy SEAL is probably the best conditioned special forces out there because you got to swim in the water, and nothing will get you in better shape than swimming.
Yeah.
So we understood conditioning, but so winning that match over Harry Hargroves, he hated us. I never. I mean, after that, the way he treated us after we won was just unnecessary. I didn't hate him before that. I didn't even hate him after until I met him later at the pit side, and he brushed past me like he was some badass. And I stepped to him later on. Of course, I was a big old dude. He wasn't very big at all. I could fight. I was trained.
Yeah.
I stepped there. I said, "Man, you don't like it. Come on, let's step out here and out of this bar. Let's go right through that door, and I'll show you what for, son." He turned around and walked off. He chicken shit.
Man.
He wouldn't fight. He was one of them that probably shoot you too. I'm trying to think of who else might have been a good influence on me or any influence at all. But old man Ed Crenshaw was an influence. I had met him before he died. He was a good guy. Yeah, I guess that's about it.
All right. Uh, it's crazy that you mentioned Norman Kimmer because
Yeah,
in Mitch Kimmer, his son's memoir, uh he spoke of Mr. James Crenshaw not being a true fast lane dog man. And he said that Jeep was a cur. And he also feels that any dog that has a defensive style is a cur. What would be your take on that?
yeah. Well, I agree with him on James Crenshaw not being a fast lane dog man. He couldn't look Norman Kimmer in the eye. He couldn't look. Me and my brother whipped him. We matched into it, and it wasn't even a hard match. It was not. It wasn't one of those that we had to go. In fact, it was less than an hour. It was around 45 minutes. The best of my knowledge, I can't remember the exact minutes, but I know it was 45 minutes or under, probably between 40 and 45 minutes. And we were using the raisin dog. We were up in Montgomery, Alabama, and it was James Crenshaw. But James Crenshaw was in the stadium. He had somebody else handling for him. He wasn't handling. But James Crenshaw got everything that he did was on the feet or on the tail, on the coat tails, the shirt tails of Maurice Carver. So he had money. He had enough money to buy dogs from Maurice Carver, and then I don't know what kind of conditioning program he had, but it wasn't good enough to whip me and my brother.
Man,
But the other thing about James Crenshaw, of all the years I'd seen him at Pitside, I never seen him handling the dog. I never seen him step over the wall. That's a big part of what I believe. You know, it's one thing to get somebody else to do it, but it's another thing for you to do it yourself and step over that wall. It's a huge. I'm telling you, something happens, and it's an adrenaline rush that I've seen people faint from it. Young guys mostly, not old
man.
timers. But anyway, so let's see. Uh, yeah, I agree with Mitch on James Crenshaw. I don't agree with him as far as a dog that fights defensively as a cur. I don't believe that. I believe that a defensive fighter is happening to be that style of dog. It's the way he negotiates his way through a match. And most good defensive dogs, after they get you in trouble, a good defensive dog would go from defense to offense. And oftentimes, you might, a defensive dog can win the match without ever doing anything but defense. But
Man.
if it has to go further, then a good defensive dog can switch to offense and go from defense to doing offensive moves and basically whipping the dog by biting him down or something like that. And then let's see, the third part of that was okay, uh, James Crenshaw, and then a cur dog, and what was the other one? Other part?
Uh, that was pretty much it. Just about Mr. Crenshaw not being fast lane and defensive dogs being curves.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Well, then I've answered that. I thought there was a third part to that question, or the way I approach it, or the way I believe it. But no, I think defensive dogs can be some of the great dogs that ever fought, and I believe that they also uh, you can't say they're cur. You just can't. I wouldn't.
Me
A
neither.
dog's a cur when he stops. If you hadn't seen him stop, then how do you call him a cur? You fight defensively and win the match, and say he wins 3 matches, and he's a defensive type of a fighter. Uh,
To me, that's
why?
a
How
smart
could you call
dog.
him a cur? You can't call him a cur unless they quit. So just because they fight defensive, I believe a dog has a style. They have it in their DNA. It's in their bloodline. They have a style of fighting uh, that just is natural to that dog. And so, no, you can't. I would never call a defensive fighter a cur. Right? It didn't mean they're curs. But I agree with Mitch as far as James Crenshaw. Definitely, uh, James Crenshaw was not a. He was reputed to be a great dog man, but in my opinion, he wasn't shit. I never, I never was that crazy about all that rascal blood either. But that was Maurice Carver's blood. That was Maurice Carver loved Bully Son and Eli Jr. I never cared much. I liked Bully Son, but I never been a big Eli Jr. guy. I'm not saying he wasn't a good dog. I'm just saying I didn't like him. But there's a lot of good dogs that I don't like. But Eli Jr. happened to be one of them. But anyway, so what's the next question?
Okay. How was Joe Testament as a pup? Uh, how were you able to tell that he was the one? And in what ways did you condition him?
Yeah. Well, I had been at Birchyard the first time I ever went to Birchyard, and I had already known the story, or I had heard. I wasn't there. I had heard the story about Shorty the preacher matching, and Shorty the preacher, the sire to Joe Testament. Shorty the preacher uh, had won a match for it went 2 hours and 37 minutes, and there was no turns in the match, and there was no out of hold count. Both dogs stayed in hold the whole 237, and uh, there was no turns. So it was a true war all the way. And the only way Short of the Preacher won was the dog he was into. His name was Joey. And so Joey lost the match because he ended up dying. He went into shock and died. Short of the Preacher was declared the winner at 2 hours and 37 minutes. So it was quite a match, and it was everybody heard about it from the East Coast to the West Coast, and people were talking about that dog for back all over. And anyway, so when I went there, I already knew about Short of the Preacher. I walked around Bert's yard a couple of times. I never noticed the Joe Testament puppy. He was a pup, probably about first time I seen him he was about 6 months old, I think. I walked all the way around the yard, and I come back to where Shorty Preacher was in front of the house. And I noticed Joe Testament there next to Shorty Preacher, and I thought, damn, that's the first time I'd seen him. And he was just sitting there like most puppies be jumping and popping the chain or coming up to you or want you to pet them or, just real active, but he wasn't active at all. He was just sitting there, real stoic, real calm, sitting there like a true, you could tell he was a warrior even as a 6 month old pup. He had a look that just like, what, man, look at this freaking dog. And I knew he was right next to Short of the Preacher, his daddy. And I thought, this has to be a pup, Short of the Preacher. It has to be. And I didn't know for sure. Found out later I was right. And I thought, man, I went back inside the house and I asked Randy. Bert wasn't there. And I said, Randy was Bert's handler, a guy that lived there at Bert's yard, Bert's house. He lived there. And he had a little camper that he lived in next to Bert's house. And Randy was the guy that took care of the yard, feed water, take care of the dogs, condition and stuff like that. And I asked Randy, I said, hey, that little brindle dog next to Shorted Preacher, what is he? He goes, yeah, that's sired by Shorted Preacher out of Red Ladybug. And Red Ladybug, she was a former winner too. She was a 2-time winner, a really great bitch. Come from Ralph Greenwood. Uh, anyway, I thought, you think Bert would sell him? He goes, I don't know. You'd have to ask Bert. And I had already bought a little bitch from Bert, and then Bert didn't get home till late that night. So I asked him the next day. I was leaving that next day, Sunday. I was leaving to go back home, and I had offered him some money. I said, what would you take? He goes, no, I don't. He's not for sale. I said, well, what do you? I said, he's a pup, and you can't really know anything about him, but why? He goes, I'm just holding on to him because I just think, I just want to hold on to him like that, and I just knew, man, I could tell by looking at him. He just had a look. And I think anybody that would have looked at him, even non-experienced dog men or dog people or people that were just interested in dogs could tell Joe Testament had a look that just showed. I mean, he had a look, and there was no mistaking it. And I had offered Bert more money because I had paid 400. I was paying 400 for a pup in those days. 400 was a lot. Most people were getting 250 or around the average run. Average pup in those days. This is late 70s. The average pup in those days was around 200, 250, like that. But I bought that little jip from Bert. It's a double bred Zeke bitch. She was sired by Sarles Bull on the top side, and on her bottom side, her mother was sired by Sarles Bull's brother. So she was almost an inbred Zeke bitch. So I bought her, And I told Bert I wanted to buy some more from him. Would he hold on to that little pup for me until I came back through, you know? Anyway, long story short, I then I offered Bert 800, doubled the price, and he said no. I said, how about 1,000? Man, it almost got him to where he was ready to sell it, but he said no. So he wasn't going to sell them to me. But, well, and then and I went through that whole story about getting Johnny Walker Red. You know, he won the match there in Mexico. We come back up. They got busted on the border. Whole thing. I end up going in there and getting Johnny Walker Red. I stole him from the San Diego County Animal Shelter, and I gave him back to Bert. And when I gave him back to Bert, I said, he goes, now what can I do for you? And I said, sell me that little brindle pup. And that's it, Bert. That's all I want. If you'll sell him to me, and I'll pay whatever you want for him. He goes, nah, I won't sell him to you. And then he paused for a minute. And I thought, damn. He goes, but I'll give him to you. Man, I was ecstatic. I was so excited. And I based my whole yard on him. First 15 years or so, I ran all that champion Uncle Bud was sired by him. And I had a 3-hour dog that won, a winner 3-hour dog that came out of him. And I had several females that had won matches out of him. I had probably won more matches with dogs sired by him but it was cool that the night I made a champion out of Joe Testament, third time out for him, I had also won the same night, won the match with his son that would become champion Uncle Bud. I matched him his first time out. He was only 16 months old. So I made a one-time winner out of champion Uncle Bud. And I had won the third time out with Joe Testament. So we were off to a really strong start. That was probably the first 3 or 4 years we were in the game. We had already made a champion, our first champion, and on our way to making a champion out of Uncle Bud. And we had already matched into Floyd Boudreaux and Irish Jerry. So we had a strong start and held on to our strong start all the way through. I think the total matches, contract matches, and I'm not talking out behind the woodshed now. I'm talking about absolutely in the running fast lane, buddy. No bullshit. We got on the running board. We were on the running board in the fast lane for substantial amounts of money. And I think by the late 90s, we had matched more than 75 contract matches. That was over about a 15, 18-year period, somewhere around 75 matches. And I know we didn't lose more than 5 or 6 matches out of that 75. And we never lost back-to-back two matches in a row. We never that. We would have 5 or 6 wins before we'd ever have a loss. We never lost back-to-back matches ever. Never happened to us. But a lot of the times that we lost, we just made mistakes. It wasn't that we got beat by a better dog. It's that we just made mistakes. And I always say there's nobody wins. Nobody learns more about what they did in a match than the one that loses. Because the one that wins really doesn't have to go back and figure out what they did wrong, because basically they didn't do anything wrong. But the one that loses has to go back and really assess what they did, and in doing what they did, they might figure out what they did wrong if they did. Sometimes you don't do anything wrong. Sometimes you just lose. And I think there was a couple of our matches in our day that out of those 5 or 6 that we lost, uh, it was just we just got beat. We just got beat. The better dog won. We lost to a better dog. It wasn't very common for us, and I'm not bragging about it and just stating it the way it was.
Yes, sir.
We just got whipped by a better dog. And hey, more power to them. And I tell you what, though, everybody that whipped us had to die to do it. Had to
Mm-hmm.
die, literally. The only losses we had, no, I take that back. It was 2, and I think there was 6 losses total. So that put us at what, 69 wins and 6 losses. Um, out of those 6 losses, I think it was 6. Two of them, we just flat out made mistakes, but the rest of them, the opponent had to die to win. And a lot of times, there was a few times where we won the match, and the people that we won over always bragged, "Oh, no, you didn't whip us. Y'all won the match, but we still live. We still live. We went back with that bitch again. We fought her again, and this and that." And then years later, I talked to that same guy. I said, "Tell me the truth. Did y'all really match that bitch again?" He goes, "No, man. She died that same night."
Damn.
I thought, "You sorry as shit. You lied to us." I said, he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "That was my pride. I just had to. I couldn't. I couldn't let you think y'all whipped us. Y'all killed us."
Yeah.
But anyway, so
All
that's
right.
just part of the game.
All right. And what what are your thoughts on the Soros blood that was bred up by Tatanka Kennels?
Oh yeah, man, she screwed that stuff up. She screwed it up bad. She started out with the best. When Bert went, and I've told this story, I won't go into it again. I know I've told it before.
Yeah, about how
Bert,
she took the dogs out
yeah,
the yard.
he went to New Zealand to oversee or be the captain of a big conformation dog show. They were just getting started over there in New Zealand. The ADBA, there somebody was buying dogs in New Zealand from all these dog men. They wanted to start a little club, and so they had a club, and then they wanted to have a dog convention or show, a confirmation show, and they asked Bert if he'd come. They paid him to come over there, and when he went over there, Joni had already been plotting to first chance she got, she was going to do what she did. She wiped Bert out. She took all the dogs, everything he had, and emptied out his bank account.
Man,
All the money, they had a joint bank account together. God, I don't know how much was in there, but it wasn't no small amount. I imagine $34,000. But she took all that money and she used it to buy a piece of property. She had already found the property. In fact, I'm pretty sure she had already put money down on that property without Bert knowing it.
man,
But they had been fighting, and they had run us off some years before that. But it wasn't long after what they did to me and my brother, she did to him. But
man.
anyway, she got the dogs, good dogs from Bert, all those good dogs, and the money, and went up there right up the road, not very far. And she began breeding them dogs, and of course Bert, he had gotten to the place where he wasn't healthy anymore. He couldn't take care of them, so he got out of it. He had already had like 3 heart attacks by the time she robbed him of his dogs. Anyway, she met people, I don't know who, but she got a hold of some bloodlines, and she just screwed that whole line of dogs up. They were some good dogs. I mean, telling you, they were they were top flight dogs that she got for Bert. Bert was breeding some of the best blood in the country. One thing I gotta say about Bert, he was a damn good dog man. He knew how to breed dogs. He knew what a good dog was, and he knew how to, put them together. And he was just good at it.
Yeah.
But and she learned a lot from him. I know she did. But nevertheless, she got up there on her own, and once she did, she's fucked that whole bloodline up. She screwed it up. I know she ruined it. There was a guy named Mickey Smith. He lives over in Texas. He's somewhere outside of Dallas. I think Tyler, Texas, or something like that, somewhere over there. Now he's not. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to say anything bad about him, but he's not real healthy anymore. He smokes cigarettes real bad, and I think he's got emphysema, so he's not really healthy. But I gotta say, he bred those dogs pretty pure. He kept them pure, but he did introduce some other blood into his dogs. But he did a pretty good job with the blood he had from Bert. He bought Bert out. He was the guy. He showed up at Bert's and he bought Bert out. Bert had maybe 8 or 10 dogs left on his yard, and he bought everything, the whole thing for a lump sum. And I think he did a pretty good job with what Bert had. But Joni, she got the best of what Bert had, and for a long time they were fine. But then she started introducing something else in there, and she fucked it up. They didn't
Yeah.
even look like you. Sorrel's dogs had a certain look. They did. I don't. People might not believe this, but I could look at a dog and tell it was a Sorrel's dog. I could in those days. Nowadays you can't, but in those days you could, and um, I knew what a good Sorrel's dog looked like, and the dogs that she had after so many years went by, she started introducing their blood, and they didn't look like Sorrel's dogs at all, not even close.
Yeah.
But
Some
that
of
guy
them,
Yeah,
they weren't real. Most of them that I've seen weren't real muscular. Like they have good conformation, but they weren't as muscular as the dogs of old.
yeah, yeah.
And
Well, I think that's right. Yeah, I think you're right.
it seemed like too she was breeding for a certain color, cause
Yeah,
that black and tan.
yeah, that's right. She specifically bred for black and tan, and overlooked the idea of breeding game dogs, one game dog to another game dog to get game dogs. She quit doing that altogether. And I think she was scared too. She didn't want to find out what she had. And, I don't know. I don't know. She's out of it now. She don't even own a dog no more. She's done.
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah, she's out of it. She's done with it. But so no, I don't think she did a good job at all. I'll tell you a story about what I know she did. Back right after Bert had his heart attack, they were living in my house in Ponce de Leon. That's my home. That was my home at the time, Ponce de Leon, Florida. And they were living in my house. But me and my brother had moved out, and we got a job. We took work. We went to work so we could earn money to pay for our dog. Because before Bert came, that was the bad part, was we didn't have no money because we were afraid to leave the yard to go to work. So man, we did every by hook or by crook, everything, anything we could do. We little odd jobs here and there, scrounging for this and that. We weren't drug dealers though. We never sold drugs. We never did that. Never did do anything like that to make our money. We make it come by it honestly. But it would always be a part time here, or a 1 week there, a couple of days here, a couple of days. We were always afraid to take anything substantial because we didn't want to be away from the dogs because we was afraid that somebody might steal them. But Lost my train of thought about what was it you asked me about?
Oh, you was gonna tell
Uh,
me about something that she done.
oh yeah, I had come out there one. They were in the they were at our place, and we had both our yards together. It was our yard and their yard, but they were all mixed together. And I went there to the house, and she didn't know I was there because she was in the backyard. And Bert was there in the house talking on the phone when I got there. And, I spoke to him and said, hey, Joni's out in the yard. You want to go out there and check her? He goes, I got a customer here. I got to finish talking to him. I said, oh, yeah, okay. I'll go out back and see what she needs some help with anything. So I went out back. She's over there breeding some trash. I mean, because Bert had trash. He had trash dogs back to basically they were culls. They were dogs that Bert would sell to certain people that didn't care if they were game or not. Because there was a lot of people that buy dogs, for confirmation dogs or something like that, but they weren't necessarily even Bert's bloodline. But Bert would buy out these newcomers and would have a half a dozen dogs and decide his wife didn't want him to have them no more, and he'd bring them back to Bert, and Bert would buy them for pennies on the dollar and put them in there, and then we go and find out which ones were the good ones, and that'd be like maybe 1 out of 5 that was good,
Damn.
and then the rest we wouldn't get rid of them or shoot them or nothing. We'd keep them. Bert would sell them, and so Bert would sell the trash, but I caught her breeding the trash. And I thought, Johnny, why are you doing that when you got good dogs over here to breed to? He goes, I don't know. Don't tell Bert. Don't tell Bert. That's the first thing she said. But I know that's how they got that black and tan stuff.
Oh
That's what
man.
I believe she was doing. But I knew then they had not been there long. It hadn't been a year since they moved from Arizona to my place in Florida. And I knew better than to tell Bert because I didn't want to be a wedge between Bert and her and me be the third man out. And
Yeah.
next thing you know, I'd be on the bad side. But so I was careful not to rub rub it the wrong way and get into, a situation between Bert and Joni.
Yeah.
And I wanted to stay on Joni's good side. And of course, I had Bert already because I had gotten the Johnny Walker Red Dog back for him. And once I did that, hell, we were friends.
Yeah.
And Joni didn't have no such intentions towards me at all. But I don't know if I told you this story or not, but I tell it now. This is regarding Joni. But there was a guy named Mike. He was in those days with a kennel called Vietnam Kennels. And I think he was from up in Tennessee or something. I don't know if he lived in Tennessee then or not, but he does now. He's a good guy. I talked to him pretty regular, but it wasn't too many years ago. He told me the story that he had been down there. He had been down to Florida to Bert's, to my place, to buy dogs from Bert. And he wanted to buy Uncle Bud, and I looked at Bert. I said, "No way, he ain't buying no sir. He ain't for sale." He said, "I'd give you $20,000 for him." That was incredible because that was like 85 or 86.
Man.
And I said,
Big
"No
money.
way, $20,000." And that was a lot of money back then. And even by today's standards, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
But anyway, I said no. But he had bought some dogs from Bert. But years later, way, way later, after Bert and Joni split up, and Mike called me here. He called me and he's just telling me the story about Joni. I said, "What?" He goes, "Well," he goes, "I was talking to Joni one day, and she told me that she was working for the Greenwoods in those days, ADB. She was working for the ADBA, because they got employees. She was working for them, and she was good friends with Ralph Greenwood's daughters. You know, Amy and let's see, there's Amy, there's Katie, and there's Patty. Those three, and she was good friends with all of them. But she had an occasion for some reason. I don't know why. I think it was a dog confirmation show or something. And she wound up going with Katie or one of them down to see Bert because there was a dog show somewhere nearby. And of course, Bert and Ralph were good friends, and there was something they needed from Bert, so they went there. They went to Bert's yard, and she saw the dogs, and she saw also that Bert was alone. Bert didn't have a wife. Bert had a wife, but he run her off. She was a sweetheart, man. Her name was Jean. I knew her, and she was awesome. Now this is years later after he ran her off. And I tell you, he made a big mistake there because she was awesome. She was a sweetheart, nice looking girl too.
Oh yeah.
But he ran her off, and he ended up. Joni told this story to Mike, and she said she was telling Mike. She goes, when I got to Bert's yard and saw those dogs, and saw he didn't have a wife, goes, I made up my mind right there. I was going to have them dogs. Those dogs were going to be mine someday. And
Oh
that's
yeah.
exactly what she told Mike. And sure enough, she ended up stealing everything Bert had.
God almighty.
Damn sure did. And that was years later after the fact that she told Mike that story. And it would be years when she made up her mind years later that she would steal the dogs.
It's
So,
crazy, man.
yeah, isn't that crazy? She
Yeah.
was, I tell you what, that's a damn conniver right there, buddy. And I tell you another thing about her, she hates men. She's a man hater. And if she can't control you, she hates you as a man. She could
Oh yeah.
never dominate me. She tried to dominate me because she knew how much I loved Bert and how much I loved the dog. She knew it. She knew I loved dogs and she knew I loved Bert. And I'd have done anything for Bert. I would have. But Bert was a cold guy, man. He was the type of guy, no matter how good of friends you were with him or thought you were good friends with him, and I'd have done anything for Bert. Bert never. That didn't move Bert at all. That didn't impress Bert. You could be a good friend to him, and he would never be your friend. You could be his friend, but he would never be your friend. So,
Yeah.
as the way Bert was, he was just cold that way. But he was a great dog, man. I gotta say, he was really one of the top dog men of the day, and that's why a lot of credit that I give to Bert is uh, why we won so many matches, through the years. I mean, from the time of late 70s all the way up until late 90s. That's about a 20-year period.
Man.
75 or so matches. I got to give a lot of the credit to Bert because he helped us. I mean, we felt like we knew how to condition a dog or what it would take to get a dog in shape. We probably would have done pretty good, but I never would have known what to do as far as the real details, of what was
Yeah.
going on in those days. And Bert gave us a lot of those things that it would have taken us some years to learn how to do. So that was why we had such early success. But I think a lot of our success early was partly because of him, but then uh, running toward the mid range of our dog time, we had improved on what Bert taught us. In fact, he began, asking us, hey, what'd you do here? What'd you do there? How'd you do that? What'd you do? And of course, we tell him, oh, yeah. Yeah, Bert, we switched this up a little bit from what you taught us. See, that's the thing about Bert. He was always open to doing and improvement. You know, a lot of guys shaping a dog, you can't teach them nothing.
Yeah.
You can't teach them. They won 5 matches, and now you can't teach him nothing. But truth is, he won 5 matches because it was a fluke. He ran into people that didn't know what they were doing. But you run into somebody that knows what they're doing, you're going to find out real quick what kind of conditioning program you got. But trust me, you know. And there's a lot of guys out there today that do definitely have learned and figured it out. And some of them have, some of them haven't. But I think the quality of the dog men today is low because they don't have a regard for the dog. They're only interested in the glory that they're going to get out of winning. You know,
Yeah.
they win a match and it's all about them. I seen a guy win a match and throw his dog in the trunk of the car.
Man,
Open the trunk, throw him in there, and then drive off. And
crazy.
find out next week that old dog died. The time I got home, he was already dead. But they don't care. They don't care about that. There's no honor in what they're doing. It's sick. That's it. Man, what a prize. You win a match with a dog, man, you should put that dog on a pedestal and absolutely make him the best thing that ever happened to you. And if you treat dogs that way, you'd have more success.
Sir.
But if you don't love your dog, if you don't really love them, you can't be the guy that, you know, you're never going to be the guy that's successful. You're just going to be a flash in the pan.
Yep.
You might win a few now, win a few here and there. And next thing you know, you're going to get in trouble because you don't have the right focus. You're focused on the wrong things.
Sir.
Anyway, so what's the next question?
Um, what are your thoughts on Tom Garner and the dogs that he has produced?
Well, I think Tom has produced some good dogs. Now, I want to say, as far as quality of a dog kennel, you're probably not going to find a higher quality, a better quality kennel. I mean, of course, he's got the money. I mean, he's got everything you could ever want in a kennel. I mean, he's got a vet. I don't know that, but I've heard that he's got a vet on call all the time. That he's got a vet that pretty much just tends to him and his kennel, and pretty much that's like 100% of Tom Garner's success is he's got the vet that takes care of all his veterinary needs and all the medications and care and understanding of the medical needs of a dog yard, of a kennel. So in that regard, I think I got to take my hat off to him. He's really gone the extra mile to have the top kennel, probably as far as, and I'm only speaking about the quality of the kennel. I'm not talking about the quality of the dog man because I put him in the same category that Mitch Kimmer put James Crenshaw. He's
Yes,
a
sir.
counterfeit dog man. He's only a good dog man because he has money. But as far as I'm concerned, he's never stepped over the wall with a dog in his arms, and he's never been in where you handle him in the heat of battle in a 2 hour, you know, absolute top quality. Both dogs conditioned to the highest peak that they can be conditioned, and both dogs are not only well conditioned, but both dogs are game and hard biters. So
Yes,
you get
sir.
a hard biting game dog against another hard biting game dog, and both of them are conditioned. Tom Garner's never done that. He's only had it done for him. And he's the Spike dog, the great Spike, grand champion Spike. It wasn't his dog. He bought that dog as a grand champion. It had already been campaigned by somebody else. I don't even know who they were. But Tom Garner, and even what's his name, Chinaman's probably the best dog he ever owned. He wasn't. He was campaigned by somebody else. Won the matches with him. He was a great dog. Chinaman's probably the greatest dog that Tom Garner ever had. But I think Spike was up there with him. But I'm not sure that much about Spike, but I do know that Spike was owned by somebody else and campaigned by somebody else. So I don't got no respect for Tom Garner. I've got no respect for him. He ain't done what I've done. He's got lots of money. He ain't been in combat with the Navy SEALs in Vietnam. I have,
Sir.
and yeah, I just don't. I don't have any regard for Tom Garner. He's a plus. I've caught him in lies. He lies. He's a liar. Talked to him on the phone one day, and I know he knew who me and my brother were. I mean, everybody that's been in the dog game for any amount of time knows who we are, and they know who we are because we campaign a lot of dogs in the 80s and 90s, and even later than that, some to some degree, and been involved in a lot of other helping other people in success with their dogs. So we have a name. We've had a name for years. I talked to him on the phone. He goes, "No, I don't know you. I don't think I've ever heard of you." Yeah, I thought to myself, I said, "You now I know you. That's a lie." I knew it was a lie. And I could tell by the way he said it. I said, "You don't remember me?" Because see, my brother knew him real well because my brother was up there in North Carolina dealing with some problems that he had with a guy that had gotten dogs from my brother and ends up having to go up there to get them back in the court. It wasn't a dog fighting thing. It was something else. I don't know what happened, but this guy had gone to court and he was losing everything he had. And my brother tried to petition the court to get the dogs back that he had sold to this guy that he had never paid for. Anyway, the court, my brother never got the dogs back, but he met Tom Garner there. Tom Garner was trying to help him a little bit. And so my brother and Tom Garner actually had a relationship for a few weeks where my brother was going back and forth up there.
Sir.
And it was a lot of effort for my brother to drive up there and, you try and take care of that and get his dogs back. And in the process, he got to know Tom Garner real well. And then I talked to Tom Garner. I can't remember why I was talking to him, but it's some years ago. And he tried to act like, oh no, I don't remember him, your brother. I don't think I know him. I know I don't know you, but I can't recall that. And I related to him blow by blow what my brother went through and all the experience, the court case and they even went out to dinner one night together. Tom Garner took him out to dinner and he had asked my brother if he would be willing to condition dogs for him because in those days we had a big reputation for conditioning.
Yeah.
And Tom Garner asked my brother if he'd shape dogs for him, and my brother said, "Nah, I don't shape dogs for nobody but me and my brother." Kind of like that. But, so I related the story, and Tom Garner acted like, "No, I don't recall that. No, no, I don't think so. No, I don't know him." And I said, "You don't know him or me, Madison Parker. You don't know us at all. You've never heard of us." No, sure have. I thought, you lying motherfucker. I didn't say that to him, but I thought to myself, it's a lying motherfucker. So I got no respect for him at all. None
Mm.
at all. And I've heard other stories about where he had misrepresented some stuff. I won't go into it. But I only relate about him what I have actually experienced. I can't relate what I heard by somebody else because I
Yes,
don't
sir.
know if it's absolutely true, but I do know for a fact that there was other people that told me stories that I can't really talk about because I wasn't there.
Yes,
So
sir.
therefore, I wouldn't want to repeat it because I didn't see it. I'm telling you the story about Tom Garner because I talked to him on the phone.
Yes, sir.
And when he tried to tell me that he didn't know who I was, he didn't know who my brother was, he'd never heard that story about, him going to court over this, that, or the other. None of that related, none of that. Didn't remember none of it. As if my brother was an idiot. And my brother was telling me this story. Hell, I was the one taking care of the dogs when my brother drove up to North Carolina trying to get the dogs back that he had sold to this guy. So it's like, yeah, you're telling me my brother's a liar, and you're telling me you don't know who I am. It's like, what the fuck are you? I thought, man, am I crazy? And when I hung up, I thought, no, that's a lying
Yeah,
motherfucker.
that's how it be
Anyway,
sometimes.
yeah, that's so Tom Garner. I got no regard for him, none whatsoever. I think he does have good dogs, though. I mean, although I've heard a lot about some of his dogs, a lot of the stuff he's selling today is quitting. I've heard that. But
Yes,
again, I don't know because I'm not in that part of the game anymore.
yes, sir.
But I hear stuff.
Yes, sir.
But again, I'm not involved with anybody that's fighting dogs, so I don't really know. But I've just heard through the grapevine that a lot of those dogs he sells, puppies and that. I got one here. I got a Tom Garner bred dog here that I got from somebody else.
Yes, sir.
Uh, I got the dog from another guy that had gotten the dog from Tom Garner and ended up having to get out of the dogs and sold me the little bitch for pennies on the dollar what he paid. But he was a friend of mine anyway, and he wasn't trying to make no money on her. But I got her. I've got puppies out of her. She's acting good. I mean, she's a good acting bitch. I like her, but I don't know much about her as far as box wise. I don't know, but I have hunted her a little bit. She's a goer, man. But
Yes, sir.
anyway, what's next?
Um, let's see. Um, uh, what bloodlines or dogs do you respect the most and why?
I respect the Carver line more than anybody, but I respect the old Carver line. I'm not really big on that Young's. What is that stuff? Oh gosh, can't remember how it goes, but the old Carver blood. It would be the most respected for me would be Carver's Black Widow, Carver's Miss Spike, Klaus's Zeke. Now, Maurice Carver didn't breed Zeke, but I have a high regard for the Zeke dog. No, because a great deal of matches I've ever matched were with these dogs that were sired by Sarles Bull. And I don't say, when I say Zeke, I'm not talking about Indian Bolio. I'm talking about Sarles Bull.
Okay.
Indian Bolio was a good dog, but he was a head dog. Uh, he was a smart fight dog. He'd be like the defensive kind of fighter. He wasn't. He was a good dog,
Yes,
but he
sir.
wasn't the best dog of the Zeke blood. The Bolio dog was a great producer, and he was a good pit dog too. But he was a better producer than he was a match dog. As far as my respect, highest regard, I'd say Carver's Black Widow, Carver's Miss Spike, um, Woods Miss Pool Hall Red, um, gosh, those three, Miss Spike, Black Widow, Miss Pool Hall Red. Then on the male side, I'd have to say Boomerang be my top pick for males. And
Good.
then Klaus's Zeke would be up there. He was a bad mother. I always liked the Bully Son dog. Bully Son was a good dog. Never had much regard for the Eli Jr. dog. Bully Son, uh, Davis's Boomerang, of course, that's Carver.
Yes, sir.
Klaus's Zeke. And then that Shoshone dog that Bert Sarles had. God, I'd love to have that son. God almighty, what a specimen. When you looked at him, you could tell, oh my God, look at this dog. That's the kind
Man.
of look. He had a look. It was just like, wow, this is a true combat veteran and a monster. Just you just would not want to ever be looking across the pit with a dog in your hands having to go into that. You just don't want to be seeing that dog. You don't. So he's up there, but he was sired by Charles Bull. I think it was the best dog Charles Bull ever produced.
Man.
But so I guess that'd probably round it out. On
All
the
right.
female side, Black Widow, Miss Spike, and Woods Miss Pooh Hall Red on the female side. And the male side would be Bully Son, Boomerang, what I say, Shoshone, and Klaus Zeke. Yeah,
All right.
that's about it.
All right. w- well, excuse me. Well, man, I appreciate you for taking the time, man, to do this interview with me, man. It's been a real good learning experience, and especially hearing it coming from a true veteran that was there back in those times, man. It's real cool.
Thank you, CY, for the vote of confidence. I hope that I open that I didn't ramble on too much.
Oh, nah,
Sometimes I
man.
have a tendency to get off the topic or maybe get away from answering the question you asked, but I sure
Listen,
do appreciate you letting me talk to you and
yes, sir. It's a
share.
lot. You shared a lot of jewels with us today. We're gonna wrap things up. I like to eventually get a part two with you soon,
Okay,
if that's
yeah,
possible. And
sure.
man, I sure appreciate it. Until then, this is CY from the American Game Dog Podcast. And we'll catch you next time.
Thank you, CY. You take care.
All right, you too.
Call me anytime. Yes, sir. Bye bye.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye.